Hi there and welcome. Today I am going to talk about 6 things that I think is very good as a beginner to know about concerning clay and ceramics. Now, the first thing is, of course, choosing your clay. It might sound easy, but you always have a lot of different clays to choose from. First of all, we have 3 clays that are the most common. It's earthenware, stoneware, and porcelain clay. Earthenware is perfect for beginners. It's cheaper than the other ones. You don't need that high temperatures. It's a clay that's easy to build with. You can roll it, you can build a lot of different things. Perfect for pots and wine coolers, etc. There are really beautiful glazes for earthenware, and you actually often get the colors that they show in the catalogs. It turns out really good. One negative side is it's not always waterproof, because the lower temperatures doesn't make it automatically waterproof. By glazing it you can make it waterproof. Stoneware clay is a little bit more expensive. It needs higher temperatures, up to about 1300 degrees Celsius. It comes in many different packages and clays, even though it's stoneware. You can have lots of grog, which means that it's inside of the clay you have these small crushed, already burnt clays. It makes it really hardy when you want to build something and if you want to have it outside. It's waterproof straight away, even though you haven't glazed it, if you burn it at the higher temperatures. Stoneware has a tendency to eat up a little bit of the glazing, especially if you have a darker colored base of clay. It will not always turn up the way it looks in a catalogue, so that's something to remember. Porcelain clay is more for professional use. It's not as easy to work with as earthenware and stoneware clay. It's perfect for plates, and if you build it out of a slab, but to build sculptures is really hard, because it has an elasticity of its own and a memory in the clay, so it always wants to return to its basic form. You need high temperatures, about the same temperatures as stoneware. Number 2 is a really short thing. It's a bucket and a lid. When you buy clay today, the transportation costs are really high, and you probably buy lots at the same time, if you don't have a hobby shop where you can buy your clay. So therefore, when you get like 10 packages of clay, it's really good to store it in a bucket with a really secure closed lid. Don't store it in the plastic bag that it came in, because it will actually dry out. In a bucket with a good lid, it will keep the moist for many years without you having to do anything. Remember though, always mark your bucket with what kind of clay you have inside. You might otherwise forget it. And the temperatures and the name of the clay is really important, so you know what you have inside. And don't mark the lid, because you can mix the lids, so that's important. Number 3, air and hollow. Before you start working with your clay, it's always good to remember that you need to wedge your clay. This way you get all the air bubbles out and you build up a plasticity in the clay, so it's easier to work with. And the clay becomes smoother. All the thick pieces you build, they need to be hollow, so if you make something big, you need to make it hollow. And also, if you have something thicker than 2 fingers, it's really good to have a hole in it. So you might need a tool to stick a hole for airflow in your clay. Otherwise, the tension in the clay when you fire it might crack your product, and that's not so fun. And of course, if you build something, you can't have a big bowl without a hole in it, because then you have built yourself a bomb that will blow up in the kiln. Number 4 is slip and score. Always when you attach 2 different pieces of clay together, you need to slip and score. The slip is the glue that keeps the 2 different parts together. So if you make something out of coils, you need to score and slip and push them together. This way it will attach. Otherwise, when it dries, you will probably have 2 different pieces. The slip is the glue, and the slip should always be made of the same clay as you work with. Number 5 is shrinkage. And shrinkage is something you need to think about, because always when you make something, your products will shrink in the drying process and in the firing. So remember also, even the holes will shrink. So if you make a candle holder, the hole is probably too small when it's done, if you just use a candle when you make it. Some clays will shrink up to 10%, and it usually says on the package how much the shrinkage is. One other thing to remember is, when you use a mold, let's for instance say I want to make something out of this plate, if you put a slab inside, you can leave it for a longer while, because when it shrinks inside here, it will not break. But if you cover it and let it dry, the clay will probably crack, because the shrinkage builds tensions in the clay and you have cracks. So that's good to remember. Also, when you leave clay to dry, I usually put 2 layers of plastic on the surface when I leave my clay to dry, especially if I have some delicate parts, because then they can glide on the plastic instead of just stick. That builds also tensions, and it might go wrong and crack or fall off. So remember that. Number 6, surface and covers. Always when you work with clay, it's very good to work on wood. I usually use plywood or a chipwood board as a surface, especially when I wedge and when I roll out the clay and work with it. Afterwards, you can cover it with plastic when you start building, or if you want to let it dry. Don't just leave the clay on a plywood board or a chipwood board, because the moist will go through the board or to the board, and it dries too quickly and it might crack. Remember to cover your work with a plastic bag when you're done, and leave it to dry. Usually it takes 1 or 2 weeks. If you have the opportunity to go and check in between, when the drying process has been going on for a while, it's good to loosen the plastic a little bit so air can start flowing in. To know if something is dry or not is really easy. If it feels cold, it's still not dry. When it reaches room temperature, it's dry, and you can actually feel it that way. If you're not really sure, leave it a little bit longer, because if you put it in a kiln and fire something that's not completely dry, it will probably crack. So there you are. These are the 6 things that I think are important to remember when you begin with clay. You can take a look at all of my other videos, because I've made a lot of tutorials, and I will upload more and more as time goes by. Some of my products are still drying, so I will show you the result when they are done. Thank you so much for watching, and remember to subscribe.